Hello, everyone. Welcome to Citizen Sports Talk. Jacob Smith, Kaden Reinhard. Another edition of spring action. Kaden, kicking off with two Carroll County soccer matches on Monday. Take it away.
Yeah, like you mentioned, we're starting on the pitch because kind of seemed like a bye week for baseball diamond sports this week. But for Carroll County soccer, both the boys and the girls took on the Glenver Highlanders. Same kind of results for them. We'll start with the girls. Lost a really low-scoring contest, 1-0, which is the total opposite from their two matches last year. Carroll County got swept by the Glenver girls 8-0, 8-0 last year. So the 1-0 loss this year doesn't seem too bad in relation to that. They dropped to 1-2 on the year. Both losses have been those 1-0 losses, so it's kind of those close matches, those close, low-scoring matchups for the Carroll County Lady Cavaliers soccer team that just they kind of can't come away with. You know, they finished last year 10-6-2, so probably a couple games they're just trying to kick off that rust from last year. But moving on to the boys against Glenver, that Highlanders boys team they're pretty good. I mean, that's probably even downplaying them. I mean, 23-0 last year, winning states. They took down the Carroll County boys 8-0 at home. That match was in Salem. Carroll County boys dropped to 1-4-1 on the year. They also kind of down from last year. They finished last year 9-8-3. So still for them trying to kick off some of that rust as well, just like the girls. But, you know, it's a hard matchup when you take on the Highlanders. So, Jacob, you want to move on to Tuesday's action unless you have anything about those Monday matchups?
Talking about Monday real quick, you talking about, like, shaking off the rust a little bit from last year. That's kind of what this early March, or late March, early April, like, stretch kind of is. We've talked about before. Even though it's one regular season, it kind of feels like two different seasons at the same time. You'll see two different teams at the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Moving on to Tuesday action, you were referring to it a moment ago, Kaden. Carroll County, the Diamond Sports were Tuesday. Softball traveled to Salem to take on the Glenver Highlanders. A very convincing, would probably be an understatement for giving the score, 20-2. The final score, the Lady Cavaliers able to pull away with the win in Salem. They improved to 3-4 on the year. And an interesting fact, just looking at the scores for their young season, they're 3-0 when they scored double-digit runs. So maybe a high-scoring offense and hot bats what the Lady Cavaliers need to have success for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, that's that stat 3-0 when they scored double digits. That might seem easy, but we're so early into the season, scoring double digits 3 times is already so impressive. So I think that's where that stat kind of earns its mark.
Absolutely. Floyd County already one-upping them 4 times. Well, 3 times. They're averaging 15 runs a game in their 4-0 stretch. We'll talk a little bit about that, just that. You referred to it at the start of the episode, just this weird bye week that Floyd County got this week. No baseball. That was already scheduled going into the week. Same with boys and girls soccer. The Lady Buff softball actually were supposed to have a game on Friday against the Radford Bobcats. Got rescheduled to May 20th, and we might get into that a little bit later. But finishing up the Diamond Sports on Tuesday, Kaden, a much closer contest in Hillsville between Cavaliers baseball and the Highlanders baseball club or baseball teams. Carroll County gets their first Three Rivers District win of the season. They're now 2-3 on the year. Peyton Spencer for Carroll County pitched all 7 innings, and he had a scoreless game, didn't allow a single run. And Camden DeHaven involved in both scoring plays that got Carroll County their 3 runs. So, again, a big opening or first district win. Had that close loss against the Cougars in Stewart last week. Able to bounce back with the win this week on Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it just a second ago, that bye week with Floyd. So the Cavaliers and the Highlanders got us through a couple matches this week. And looking at it, the pitch versus the diamond were 2 opposite sides results for the Cavaliers. I mean, the Highlanders took the pitch, obviously, but then the Cavaliers the next day were able to rebound, take those diamond sports from Glenver.
Absolutely. And kind of branching off that a little bit, you talked about Glimmer's boys soccer going 23-0. We looked at before we started just to confirm. Glimmer's girls made the state semis last year for the soccer tournament as well. So definitely two quality programs in Glenver, boys and girls soccer.
Definitely, and you can say the same about the Diamond Sports for Carroll. I mean, last year they were, this year kind of more on a downspout from what we've seen. But last year those runs that they were able to produce on the Diamond were pretty special for them.
Absolutely. And again, we talked about it earlier, young season, so still time to figure things out.
Definitely.
Transition to next week. We only had 2 days worth of action to really discuss this week. Again, Floyd County, for the most part, just getting to take the week after Easter off. Not sure how intentional that was or just the way the schedule played out. But a little bit busier of a week next week, Kaden. Why don't you go ahead and get us started discussing about that?
I don't even know if we can say a little. I think we can fully pass that and say a busier schedule next week. As for both the Cavaliers and the Buffaloes, matchups on every day, Monday through Friday next week. So barring any postponements like we've seen this week, that'll how it stands. We'll start in Carroll, and we'll even have a couple repeat matchups with Cavaliers and the Buffaloes matching up this week. But like I said, we'll start in Carroll with the Cavaliers on Monday, April the 13th. Boys and girls varsity tennis will start against the Buffaloes. The girls will stay in Carroll while the boys will travel to Floyd. And then as well on Monday, the boys JV and varsity soccer also will travel here to Floyd for their matchups, and then girls soccer will stay in Carroll for their matchup against the Buffaloes. Heading on to Tuesday for the Cavaliers, baseball will travel to Floyd, baseball varsity will travel to Floyd while their JV team will host the Buffaloes in Carroll. And then moving to softball, just the varsity matchup for the Carroll County Cavaliers against the Buffaloes. That'll be in Carroll that week. And then girls soccer ends Tuesday's action against heading down to George Wythe. We'll end that Tuesday action. Just 2 games on the short Wednesday in the midweek for the Cavaliers. Junior varsity baseball heads down to Fort Chiswell, while the boys varsity tennis heads to Radford for their matchups. So kind of starting to round out the week, but a busy Thursday for the Cavaliers. We'll start with girls JV and varsity soccer. We'll take on Radford at home, while boys kind of completes that quad versus the Radford soccer team, while they'll head to Radford for their JV and varsity boys matchups there. And then for softball, junior varsity and varsity will play against Fort Chiswell. The JV team will stay the JV team will travel to Fort Chiswell, while the girls varsity softball team stays in home against Fort Chiswell. Then rounding out Thursday's action on the 16th will be girls varsity tennis. They as well head to Radford to match up with the Bobcats, just like the girls soccer team. I read that wrong. The girls will host Radford, just like the girls soccer team will host Radford in Carroll that day. And then on Friday the 17th, boys and girls outdoor track will head to Floyd for that outdoor track matchup there. And then baseball and softball quad versus Radford, while JV will head down to Radford, and then varsity softball and baseball stays in Carroll. So a busy week for the Cavaliers. I think even a busier week for the Buffaloes, starting on Monday the 13th. Middle school baseball and softball against Christiansburg, while middle school soccer will head to Christiansburg for their matchups there. Then boys and girls varsity tennis plays Carroll County. Like we just mentioned there, the girls head down to Carroll, boys stay in Floyd. Then as well, matchup against the Cavaliers will be boys junior varsity and varsity soccer matchups there. And then girls varsity soccer heads down to Carroll to end Monday's action. Then on Tuesday the 14th, middle school baseball and softball gets back-to-back actions. They get to host the Radford Bobcats there at the Rec Park in Floyd. And then baseball, junior varsity, and varsity, just mentioned it just a second ago, but they take on the Cavaliers that day. Floyd varsity baseball will stay in Floyd, while I keep reading these wrong. Carroll County boys baseball will head to Carroll, and then JV stays home against the Cavaliers. So softball varsity continuing on Tuesday. Their varsity softball heads down to Carroll for their matchup there, and then girls soccer will head to Galax, ending Tuesday's matchups. Then on Wednesday the 15th, another busy day for the Buffaloes. They have an outdoor track matchup. Boys and girls head down to Glenver and Salem, matching up against every team in the district as always. Then middle school baseball hosts Patrick, so 3 days in a row for them. They get in some action. And then middle school softball heads to Giles. So usually we'll see, middle school, two middle school baseball and softball programs kind of stick together. They'll play their matchups the same, but they'll split up on that day. And as well, middle school boys soccer will head to Patrick, will host Patrick alongside middle school baseball. Then rounding out the midweek action on Wednesday for the Buffaloes, tennis girls varsity heads to Christiansburg, while the boys varsity heads to George Wythe for those tennis matchups. So starting to round out the week for the Buffaloes on Thursday, junior varsity baseball. They have a doubleheader on that day against Giles here in Floyd. Both games will be 5 innings. I believe it's 30 minutes in between the end of game 1 and the start of game 2 for them. And then junior varsity and varsity boys soccer heads down to Buchanan to take on James River, as well as the varsity girls tennis takes on James River, but that'll be here in Floyd. Then ending the week for the Buffaloes on Friday will be varsity baseball and softball hosting or against James River. The boys head to Buchanan while the girls host here in Floyd. And then rounding out the week, I mentioned it with the Cavaliers, but the boys and girls varsity track teams for Floyd get to host their matchup there on Friday.
So the track meets, Wednesday and Friday, correct?
Yes, sir.
So a lot of track action getting started, especially local with Glenver and Floyd being the two host schools there. In terms of games to look out for, obviously the two Floyd County teams, the varsity programs, having to head down to Hillsville. Just a nice little ride down 221 to Hillsville. Be interesting to see how both Floyd County teams respond after the week off. It'll be about a week and a half since they both last played their game or most recent game. And looking at Friday, even looking further, that Floyd County James River varsity softball game, seeing how that plays out. James River looking like they may be one of the better teams in the district and in the region for softball. And again, with two Lady Buff softball games, can they stay undefeated? They've had the 4-0 start, so we'll find out next week.
We definitely will, and I think it's going to be very exciting and, like I mentioned, very busy week. Total contrast from the post-Easter week, but I think I think every program's, they're wanting to get back out there. I'm not sure how much they like a full week of practice. That can't be, especially once you get into those games, a full week of practice kind of just gets you out of the groove. You want to be in those game scenarios.
You were talking about finding that groove after the week off, Kaden. Somebody that wants to make sure his team finds that groove once again and stay undefeated. Head coach Wes Starkey had the opportunity to talk with him after practice later in the week. So here's what Coach Starkey had to say about this week off and what to look forward to next week.
Coach Starkey, caught the tail end of practice today. I'd say it was a good way to wrap up the week, especially, given no contest this week for your team. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I thought the girls' mindset was good today at practice. It's been difficult for them to keep the focus at practice considering we don't have any games. But we know what's coming, and they're pretty excited about that. So today was a very good Friday.
How has this week looked like for you with these practices and not really having an opportunity to get a game in this week?
Well, we had pictures on Tuesday. I gave the girls Monday off because of Easter break, and I threw a little surprise in for them. We went over to watch Virginia Tech and Radford University play right after pictures on Tuesday. We did a little bonding there, and that worked real well. And but we're happy to come back with 3 good practices here, ready to go.
Looking ahead to next week, 2 district games, 3 games in total next week, starting with the trip to Carroll Tuesday. How do you, off the 4-0 start, keep momentum going after a little bit of a pause, per se, given this week with no contest?
Well, it's not difficult considering Carroll's one of our rivals. They're a very good ball team. They're well coached. They're always a handful to compete against. I have a lot of respect for Carroll. And then James River, just ditto to that. James River, their coach is a good friend of mine, and we've competed against each other for a long time. So those are two huge district games next week.
The 4-0 start for you and your team, Coach, averaging of about 15 runs per game. How do you keep that up?
Well, with the good hitters we have all the way through the lineup, we're solid right down through 7, 8, and 9. So I don't think that'll be difficult. I think they're great hitters. If they have the good mindset, I don't think we'll have a lot of difficulty putting up some runs. Probably not to that extent as we get into the tougher district games, but I still think we'll be okay.
Thank you, Coach, for the time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Coach Starkey. Like you just mentioned, trying to continue on to that 4-0 start. Coach Starkey is his 4th year back with the Buffaloes program, so great start to him in year 4.
Absolutely, and again, I talked about before we transitioned to showing the interview, Kaden, but really wanting to see how they can build off this 4-0 start with 2 district games coming up, and the Carroll County team that had an impressive win this past Tuesday, and the James River team that's considered one of the better teams in the district and the region that the Lady Buffs will be competing against in the region for softball.
Yeah, and that first matchup they're going to have to go through, that's, we mentioned it earlier, the 3-0 when the Lady Cavaliers have scored more than double digits, so that has the possibility of being really high scoring. So that's where you'll turn to the circle, look for your arms to shut down the opposing offenses.
Absolutely. The arm of Emma Biesterveld will be very important for the Lady Buffs softball there in Hillsville Tuesday. But even just the defense overall and the ability in the field that the Lady Buffs have. And again, Carroll County may be high scoring and have success when they're high scoring, but the Lady Buffs, again, averaging 15 runs a game so far through 4 contests.
We'll see if they can continue that. I mean, when you set the bar that high, it makes it tough to reach every game.
Absolutely, and hopefully they'll be reaching some more and swinging for the fences, right?
That's right. That's definitely what you want.
We'll have those 2 games all the action next week to cover in the next episode of Citizen Sports Talk. Jacob Smith, Kaden Reinhard, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.